Well, for this month's e-magazine, you join me here at Packington Summers, and I'm actually practicing for the pole fishing pairs that I'm fishing with Callum Dix. You're allowed to place your anglers, and Callum's decided to go to Barston, and I'm quite happy to come here at Packington. There's 2 lakes in, and you join me on one of my practice days here on Molan's Peg 9. It's a reasonable area, although the temperature's dipped, the water's definitely on the clear side, and there's quite a brisk wind, and obviously a little bit of rain. But the weatherman has said that it will clear up, so it probably won't. But like I say, practicing really does formulate plans, and that's exactly what I'm here to do. It's not about filling the net full of fish, although it'd be nice to catch a few fish just to try the hooks and the elastics that I've decided to use. It's quite a big match, so practice for me is very, very important. I'm not one of these people that goes practicing to fill my net. I go practicing to find out how to fill my net on the match. And today on Molan's there's quite a big head of F1s, carp, some skimmers and some small roach. Bloodworm is allowed, but not in practice, so today I'm feeding a ground bait line with a few pinkies and maggots just to see how many roach or little skimmers there are. I'm going to feed a top 5 line with maggots, a long line with maggots, and I might even throw a little bit of bait down the edge. I'm not really committing to anything because I just want to see where the fish are, see what time the fish come in my peg, and hopefully try and catch some. There is a little bit of a twist. It's pole only, obviously, so today we'll only be fishing with a pole. Pointless practicing with a feeder or a waggler when it's not allowed on the match that I'm actually fishing. Also, carp aren't allowed. F1s are, but mirrors and commons and leathers aren't allowed, so that makes it quite simple. Now here at Packington Summers at the moment, the in-bait is definitely maggots for the F1s and skimmers. Bloodworm is allowed the weekend, so that might have a little bit of effect. There's also a head of good little skimmers and some roach with an odd slightly bigger skimmer. And these are the fish that I'll be targeting. Really on the long pole and on a top 5 with maggots, I'll be targeting the F1s and an odd skimmer. I'm going to put a ground bait line off to the right with a few pinkies and maggots in just to see. I've got a few rushes to my left, and towards the end of the session I might have a go. But I really do quite a bit of edge fishing, and that's something I don't really want to practice. It's more the long pole, top 5, and to see how many little fish I can catch over the ground bait. Because in recent matches, 20-30 pounds been good. So one thing you can't afford to do is totally dismiss the small fish. You can go to these lakes that have got a good head of F1s, bream and carp in, and although bream count the F1s and carp, you can still catch a big weight. But what I'm not going to do is ignore the small fish, the roach and the skimmers, because if you draw a hard bit, or like we do know these venues can have an off day, that line can turn into the most important line that you fed. I'm going to start by feeding the top 5 line. I'll probably start there. I've got quite a good depth. A little bit different when you're fishing for F1s, everything's a little bit lighter. I've got the new orange hydro, which again is slightly stronger than the yellow, perfect for the F1s and the skimmers. I've got a 4x14 float, carbon stem, a thin hollow bristle, 014 main line. Coming down I've got a bulk again and 2 number 11 droppers. Now I've done quite a bit of research here on Packington. A lot of my friends say that fish here you need to use small shot and a bulk standard rig, i.e. a bulk and 2 droppers, because you get quite a lot of fish on the drop. But like you know, I'm a fan of the staggered bulk when I'm fishing with pellets and baits like that. I do listen to what people say, and today these are the rigs I'm using. So 014 main line, 012 hook length and a size 16 hook. The hook again, because we're fishing with maggots, is a Kamasan B510. Now that's a really good hook for these sort of fish and for maggots, and it's a hook that I have used quite a lot for maggots in the past. Not really for F1s or skimmers. One of my best friends that fishes here a bit has assured me that this is a hook to use. Going on to the long line, again exactly the same setup. Bulk 2 droppers, 014 main line, 012 and the same hook. The same float, the same elastic. What I'm really looking to do is to find out how to feed the fish and what lines the fish are on. Now, like I've already said, a real important part of my fishing is to have a line where I can just go and catch a few fish, even if it's small roach. And for that, I've put up a normal, like a bloodworm type float. It's a Team Daiwa 10, yellow hydro, 014 main line again, 09 hook length, and an 18 pellet hook. This enables me to fish either pinkies, maggots, or come the weekend, maybe even bloodworm. I have put an edge rig up. Like I say, I do a lot of edge fishing, so it's not something I want to come here and practice. I'd rather spend time doing the other the other methods. But again, a 4B12 float, blue hydro. I've got a few rushes there, 016 mainline, 013 hook length, and a size 16 hook again. The rigs are quite simple, but the one thing that I want to stress when you're actually practicing for a big match like I am, is to don't sit there, and if you go with your friend, don't sit there and try and beat your friend, don't sit there and try and fill your net. Try and find things out. Try and walk away having drawn some conclusions. And if you can do this, you stand yourself in really good stead to do well in the match. Because it's pole only the weekend, I've not set any rods up. I really want to dedicate today to practicing, and hopefully you'll see how I go about drawing some conclusions and trying to make decisions on how I'm actually going to fish, and more importantly, feed the weekend. The reason I'm talking to you back from the bank and not sat on my box is obviously it's the time of year, the fish are on the back foot, the water's gone cold and clear, and obviously any kind of disturbance can spook the fish. So we decided to do the intro slightly back from the peg. I'm probably going to start on the top 5 and just see what we catch, feed that ground bait line out to my right just to see if any fish come over it, and the maggot line long. I put a lot of emphasis on keeping quiet at your peg, not making any disturbance, and you'll probably see today if we play some fish that you can actually see the fish 2 or 3 foot down. The water's clear, although it's deep, a little bit of disturbance can make a big difference. The other thing I want to touch on is the use of fluorocarbon. Like you all know, I use it all the time now. The Drennan Supplex one is the #1. The knot formation's very good. It's exactly what it says it is, which is very, very important, as in diameter. A lot of lines are slightly thicker than they say, but the Supplex is absolutely bang on. In cold, clear water, any advantage I'm going to take. These are big, wary F1s that hopefully we'll be fishing for, and some skimmers. With the clear water, every advantage I can get. The main line is match winner as per normal, 016 on the edge rig and 014 on the other rigs. They're just toned down a little bit. I've listened to what people say, but what I am going to do through the course of the day is just mould it into the way that I fish, try a few things that I do. I'm going to listen to what people have told me. I'm not going to forget to follow my gut instinct, which is something that we stress a lot. I get asked a lot of questions, and it's not about giving someone an answer, it's giving someone the tools to answer the question themselves when they're actually on the bank and in the heat of battle. Now I think it's time to show you the bait that I bought for today's session. I'm now going to run through the bait that I've bought today. I bought a little bit of ground bait. Again, it's a dark fish meal based ground bait. Not that strong. Again, the water's going clear, so it's on the dark side, the ground bait, and we're going into winter, so it's toned down a little bit. Not the strongest fish meal that you can get. I'm going to put a few balls of this off to one side with some pinkies in that I bought, some fluoro pinkies, which I know can be good for the roach. Obviously at the weekend bloodworms allowed, so that's a little bit of a twist. And then for the bigger fish, I've got, again, the people that fish here have told me red maggots with a few bronze. Normally I'd take whites with a few reds, but I've been assured that this is the bait, and double bronze maggot or a bronze and a red is absolutely deadly for these wary F1s. Just to put it into context, 20 to 30 pounds been a good weight here lately, with 50, 60 pound winning. So you're not fishing for lots of fish. I've got some white maggots with me because they're my favourite. I will be trying them during the match. The bait's quite simple. Like I say, I've got some pinkies. I have got some other baits like corn and that with me, but pellets aren't allowed the weekend, carp aren't allowed, so it really does make it quite simple. Unless I catch quite a few fish on the ground bait line with pinkies, I'm really thinking of going down the route of fishing this match Saturday, a bit like a commercial. A little bit of bait on 3 or 4 different lines and just swap and alternate, and hopefully maybe have a good end on a top 5 with a few fish there. Again, I'm not too sure what it's going to fish like. It's been a cold night. We've had a cloudy front move in. It's quite windy and wet. I think it's about time now that we get the bait in, get settled down, and hopefully try and catch a few fish. Okay, so now I'm going to run through how I'm going to feed the lines. I'm going to feed this line off to the right at about 13 metres out the way, just so that it doesn't affect what I'm doing, but I can drop on it after a little bit and just see if any fish have come over it. On the 2 main lines, which is top 5 and 14 metres, I'm going to feed about 300 maggots at the start and look to just start on the top 5 and see what happens. I'm also going to feed a little nugget of dark ground bait on that top 5 to try and get a bit of an instant response. On both lines I'll probably be throwing it short, a few maggots and cupping a little bit just to create a little tight area, and if I don't catch there to begin with, I'll be looking for a good last hour. On the long line again, 300 to 400 maggots at the start. I'm going to try and leave this a little bit and let the fish settle and hopefully go long during the session, feeding with a little pot, 30, 40, 50 maggots in at a time, and just try and keep it ticking over. You're not looking for hundreds of fish here at Packington, but they will be quite big. So like I say, it's about patience, it's about feeding, having a few different areas, but more importantly, because it's a practice day and not a match, it's about walking off this bank knowing what to do on Saturday. Well, like I said, in practicing, it's not all about filling your net. So what I'm doing, I'm just having a look around my peg, priming up some different areas and just seeing what bites I can get. There's not lots of fish about at the moment, but it's still early in the day and it's a case of just seeing where the fish are and what they respond to. If it was a match, it would be purely about catching as many as you can, but today it's really just about trying to find out how to catch them rather than just sitting here and catching them. Well, here we are a little way into the session, and it's always nice when little things happen when you're practicing to make you start thinking. And I spoke to a lot of people before I came and they said maggots, 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 no ground bait. But I think the water's going clear, it's getting colder, and obviously we're well into winter. And the one thing, I've only caught 2 F1s at the moment, but they're reasonable size, and they both come where I've put some ground bait in. And where I've actually just fed maggots, which is what I was told to do, I've not had a bite. I'm not saying that that line won't all of a sudden become strong, but what is for sure is straight away I'm thinking that ground bait isn't exactly a kiss of death and it's not detrimental. So the only worrying thing is where I've put the ground bait with some pinkies and a few dead maggots and live maggots is I expected to catch some little roach and little skimmers, and I've not had any. I've missed 1 bite and caught 2 F1s. What I have done now, because today's all about trying to figure it out, and what I have done, I'm not worried if I mess my peg up really, is I put a little bit more ground bait short, and I've also started a line out to my left. I plumbed up. It's the same depth at 14.5 where I'm feeding my maggots. And what I've done over there is put a little nugget of ground bait and a few maggots in. And by doing that, if I do get some bites on that and still don't get bites where I've put just maggots, it's really saying that ground bait could be the answer. I think just sometimes when the water goes cold and clear, I mean you can see most of my keep net, which for a commercial is quite unusual, but I was fishing at Gold yesterday and it's the same, it's got that little clear tinge to it. And the fish were definitely on the back foot, and when that happens, little different things start to work, like ground bait. There's not a lot of fish anywhere in my peg, but the 2 decent fish that we've actually caught have both been where we've put some ground bait, so already we've got something to think about and something to work on. Obviously a lot of people think when the water's clear that ground bait's a bit of a no-no. But what you find is when the water's clear, you don't want to be feeding so often. And if you just feed maggots, they can crawl into the little gaps and you virtually end up with no bait in your peg. But with ground bait, you always end up with something in your peg. And you can tend to leave it quite a lot longer than you would, say, just a loose bait like maggots. So ground bait's definitely something that I would consider, even when the water's cold and clear. And that's the thing when you're talking about ground bait, you're not talking a massive amount. 1 or 2 little balls, even just a little tiny ball, the size of a 2p piece, this can make a difference and this can definitely hold fish. You're not talking about piling it in, but a little bit can definitely hold a few fish. Here we are into the session, and one thing is for sure, ground bait definitely seems to be the key. I've still not had a bite where I've only fed maggots, which speaks volumes to me. I've caught 3 or 4 F1s to my right, where I just put some ground bait out the way, and I've hooked 2 or 3 out now to the left where I've put a bit of ground bait. And one thing that you probably noticed today is I've fed a line quite a long way to my right. It's not something I'd do in a match, but when you're pleasure fishing and you need a bit more room to experiment, don't be afraid to go off to one angle, almost into the next peg, and just deposit some bait there, be it whatever you want to do. But it's just somewhere to go, and it can just tell you a few things. And I'm really glad I did that today, fishing out to my right. It's not somewhere where I'd feed if it was a match, because you're virtually in the next peg. But when you're here practicing, little things like that speak absolute volumes, and it makes it a lot easier to formulate your plan for the weekend. Don't be afraid to feed over to your right or over to your left and have 1 or 2 more lines in practice than you would do if it was a match, because it's little lines like that and being able to experiment and try things that are going to absolutely be priceless when it comes to actually formulating a plan for the actual match. So like I say, don't be afraid to have more lines than you would do normally, because you're not here to bag up, you're not here to win today. What you're here to do today is to try and find out how to win. Well, there we go, we've got another fish on now. Feels like a decent sized fish, hopefully not a carp. Not hooked a carp yet today, only F1s. Definitely starting to formulate a plan in my head, getting confident, which is one thing about practicing as well. You always want to try and be confident. Hooks seem to be working well. Feels like a decent fish. If it's not a carp, it's a big F1. There is some decent size F1s in here. Fighting more like a carp, but it looks like an F1, so we'll have to wait and see. No, here's an F1, which is nice. Real decent size one. Lovely to catch. There you go. Lovely one. They're the ones you want. Good 3 pound, nice and chunky. Definitely seem to be coming to ground bait. Well, like I say, I've bought a variety of hook baits with me, but the bronze maggots definitely seem to be doing the trick at the moment. A lot of times in cold, clear water, that bronze colour can really stand out. Probably why it's so good for chub in the winter on rivers when the water's cold and clear. Probably a visual thing, it definitely seems to be working quite well. Well, I've just caught the biggest fish of the day, and it was the first fish that we'd hooked short, which is quite often the case. Even when you're talking about carp, the bigger fish will be short. I have missed another bite there just after we caught that one, but there's not hundreds there. But when carp don't count and there's some decent F1s up to 4 to 5 pound, then you've definitely got to target them, especially late in the match. So again, it's another little part of the practice that's really gone well. The fact that we've fed short, on and off all day, little nuggets of ground bait, a few maggots. We've come short, and the first fish we caught there has been a real bonus. And that's probably what I'll be looking to do come Saturday. Hopefully get a few fish long, and then the last hour come in short on that top 5 line and catch a few decent ones. If you can do that, then I think you're going to be quite hard to beat. Well, I still haven't caught a fish where we just fed maggots, and that really does go to show how a venue can change, or a different approach can just catch you a few more fish. Topping up with about 40 or 50 maggots and a tiny nugget of ground bait definitely seems good. I've carried on topping up with maggots on the just pure maggot line, and like I say, I've not even had a bite there. Just topping up with little nuggets of ground bait and about 50 maggots and leaving it seems to definitely produce a few fish. You're not fishing for a massive weight. 40 to 50 pound is going to be a good weight, I think, from what I've been told and what I've seen today. So it's not like you need hundreds of fish. If you catch 20 fish, you're not going to be far off that target weight. It's about just priming a few pegs up, feeding 3 or 4 little lines, hoping you have a good finish on that top 5. And I think if you're near a few fish and you fish like that, you're going to be close to that target weight. One thing I do want to mention, even when you're fishing for these quality F1s and skimmers, you must have your float dotted right down. I see so many people, even when they're fishing for quality fish, have a big lump of float showing. And some of these bites, especially off the big F1s, hardly moves the float. It's almost like a wobble rather than the float going under. And if your float's not shotted down correctly, you're not even going to see these. So it really is a must to really shot your float down low. Nice short line, fishing nice and accurate. I'm just waiting for those little dinks, little indications. The big wary fish, and they're coming in. You can see the float dotted right down, right where I've just kinder potted a few maggots. Not getting lots of bites, but an odd one, and they're quality fish. So also not just F1s, we've had 2 or 3 decent bream there, and at the end of the day they all add up. I'm not a massive fan of moving my float, but I will reposition in it now and then if it just drifts off with the wind. Just a little lift, reposition it back onto the fed area. Just wait and wait and wait. You're not looking for hundreds of fish. That's where a lot of people get confused with this style of fishing. It's not like you need to catch 50 or 60 fish. If you catch 20, 25 fish, you've got a real decent weight. You know, tiny little dink again. We're into another fish. And this is exactly what you want come the match. You want a good last hour on the top 5. If you can get that, as well as catching a few fish early, you're going to be hard to beat. Smallest F1 of the day, but still welcome. One thing you might have noticed me doing when I'm feeding with the kinder pot is just dunking the tip in the water and the pot. And it's quite simple. All this does is add a little bit of weight to the maggots, and it stops them falling out as you ship out. It really is a brilliant tip. It's something I picked up off of Andy Bennett, who's one of the best at this game, if not the best. And it really is a brilliant little tip when you're fishing with maggots. Well, there we go, there's another one on the long pole. Really are decent sized fish, almost like carp. 2 to 3 pound. We've had a couple a little bit bigger. Really are weight builders, and I think my estimation of catching 20 fish is probably going to be about right. Absolutely fantastic fishing. Really real good day's practice. Caught fish on a number of different things, some that I didn't think was going to really work, and some that I thought probably would. But all in all, a fantastic day. Well, here we are towards the end of the session, and you might notice that I'm fishing long now, and it's just a case of just going over a few things. Just want to catch a few fish long to get my confidence up. If it was a match, probably wouldn't have come off the top 5, but it's not a match, and like we've been saying all day, it's about coming away from here confident with a few ideas and a game plan more than anything. Caught some nice big F1s long, no bream long, all the breams seem to have been short, just up that little bit of a shelf, but it's been absolutely fantastic. Because we're kinder cupping, I'm trying to fish really accurate, so unlike bream or roach, I'm not flicking my rig out, I'm just lowering it down, flicking it out and then holding it and lowering it directly down on top of those loose maggots, and it really has come to life. There's fish blowing, I'm catching an odd big F1, which is really nice fishing. Still over the ground bait, I'm not feeding any ground bait now, just feeding maggots. Just kinder potting 30 or 40 maggots every cast. Still only a single maggot. Again, you can tell it's going into winter. Single maggot, we're not getting pestered by little fish. So it really has been a fantastic day. Well, there you go, I've packed the gear up. You've seen what we've caught. It's been a fantastic day. I've had 24 big F1s, a few bream in that I didn't put into the catch shot. And it really has been fantastic. I think we'd have caught even more if we'd have stayed on that 5 metre line. But like I've said, practicing isn't about filling your net. It's about learning how to fill your net. And I'm really confident going into Saturday. The maggot line never produced, never even had a bite, which just shows how important practicing is, because I probably, without practicing, would have come and just fished maggots from what everybody was telling me. Ground bait has definitely kick-started the peg into life, and then just by kinder potting maggots over the top, been able to catch quite a decent weight of fish. Very similar short, again, fishing a nice short line, making sure that float's dotted right down. It's vitally important for these big F1s and the skimmers. A lot of people fish with too much float showing. A lot of the bites, the float just wobbles almost instead of going under, and it's those big wary F1s that have been caught a few times and they know what it's all about. If you don't dot your float down, you won't even see the indication. Just to recap, I fed a line off to my right, which again, don't be afraid to do if you're practicing. Don't be afraid to feed lines that you wouldn't normally in a match, because these lines will tell you things and steer you down the right path. It's always good to give yourself a lot of options. Today at the start I fed 3 lines, ended up feeding another line to my left. Once I'd fished for a bit and sort of picked the bones out of what was happening, I started again, another line to my left, how I thought I should fish, and that ended up being the best line, and it sort of underlined exactly what I was thinking. A little bit of ground bait to kick start the peg, and then just wean the fish onto maggots so you don't end up foul hooking a lot. Just be careful this time of year when you do start introducing ground bait, especially for F1s. Little and often, and when you can, cut it out. But it definitely brought them in the peg today, and by just weaning them onto maggots, we were able to catch virtually one every cast towards the end, even though we were waiting for them. That short peg as well, keep it primed up, make time to feed that peg, because the last hour you can really reap the benefits of that top 5 line. I haven't practiced in the edge, but one little thing I have done, I've thrown a little bit of bait in against the rushes just late on when I started to pack up. We've done the catch pitches and that, and I've just been keeping an eye out, and it's just a little trick. The rushes haven't moved, there's no swells, there's no mud being kicked up, and it's probably telling me that the edge might not actually happen. I'll wait and see where I draw come Saturday, and it might well be an option, especially if I've got a bit of depth. I threw the bait in about 2.5 foot of water, and there's been no fish coming there in the last hour, when the time of day when they really should. So that's a good little trick as well, just to round off. Quite often you'll see the fish coming in close. When they come in close, especially when you've packed up and you can see them swirling, that's a massive indication that you're probably catching the edge. But all in all, I think the temperature's going. You can probably see my breath now. The temperature's going. It's going to be a cold, clear night again, I think. And there's been a fair bit of rain. The water's definitely on the clear side. So I think all in all I've got my tactics about right. A little bit of ground bait, kinder potting maggots on 2 lines long, maybe a little bit of joker because we're allowed that at the weekend, and a short line. And I'm just going to keep rotating, dot those floats down, and try and catch 20 decent fish. I'll probably let you know on the next one how it went, but all in all I'm very happy going into Saturday, and I think it's been a fantastic day's practice.